Dr. Murray, thank you so much for taking the time to visit with me. We've had a wonderful conversation, off camera as we're getting to know each other a little bit better. And so if you don't care, just give us that little introduction to who you are and what you do.
Thanks so much for having me on your podcast, Logan. So, I'm a naturopathic physician and I've been in practice since 2002. And my practice has followed my own personal healing journey and my own spiritual journey. So, I have what I call an energetic lens and how I work with people. And the work I do, I call integrative energy healing. So, you've heard of integrative medicine. So, I work through integrative energy healing. But in a nutshell, I learned all the elegant protocols, the diagnostics from, 5-year indoctrination in naturopathic medical school. But what really helped me was energy medicine. So I had like my first hands-on Reiki session early on in practice. And I noticed that I was in just a high vibe mindset for 3 weeks, feeling very positive, better energy. So it really sparked my curiosity because unfortunately, early on in my practice, in very early years of my career, I developed a lot of health issues kind of right off the bat. And the naturopathic systems of healing just weren't really helping me. Supplements and diet wasn't enough. But it was when I went on that my own personal journey and I learned more about craniosacral therapy, shamanic healing. I did some vision quests, chakra clearing. And there was a method of healing called the reconnection that really kind of opened me up spiritually. I've had a lot of meditation teachers that really gave me a lot of resourcing. So I had a history of like 8 years of insomnia, and none of the practitioners that I saw, treatment for Lyme's, extensive acupuncture, etc. None of that was helping me. And what I realized was I had to go inward and do a lot of deeper healing. And so my practice really, you know, shifted. And in a healing session with me, we always do energy work. So I'm very eclectic.
Love it. So, all right, I want to unpack that a little bit. So even within a naturopathic framework, there is a massive degree of differences and subsets and things, right? So like what you just said out of the beginning is like the naturopathic framework of supplements and essentially diet. It doesn't hit all the points, right? Like so, my everything that I try to do is. Uh, Essentially based on biophysics in natural cycles, right? Like so, and as a Christian, some of this conversation can always be super woo or something that just
Mhm.
feels wrong, right? Like so, like anybody that's listening to this that gets offended, like I just whatever.
And I can speak to that too, because my
Right.
mom, who's like right, total like Catholic, questions a lot of what I do. I'm very eclectic. I honor Christianity, and if people aren't okay with what I say, that's fine. But I do have a lot to offer for people who are willing to open their minds. You know.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And so what I'm finding is that once we get onto before I go there, terminology matters a lot, and everybody has a different interpretation of what words mean, right? And that is where I think that we get in a lot of our fights and disagreements and stuff is because we have this preconceived notion of what our definition is on a certain word, right? So I'm going to open up a little bit of Pandora's box here. When we're discussing quantum, right? Like that has been bastardized and just disgusting to the point that it is a marketing tool, right? Quantum in the context that I'm referring to simply means small. Like once we get down on the, inner mitochondrial membrane level, things work different. And I think that's really important to understand. So like every time that I have one of these conversations, I'm actually pinning it to physics, biophysics specifically, in that there are a little bit different rules because I actively fight with physicists too, right? Because they think these processes don't happen in a warm, wet environment. There's just a lot to unpack there, but my point is the things that you're saying like actually are going to make sense on a electromagnetic photonic level when you bridge it together. There's just different terms for what we're discussing.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
Exactly. I think you're going to be coming at it more from the subatomic space, and I'm going to be coming at it more from my own personal experience, which has to do more, I guess you would say woo, like what I
Well,
felt physically, but it has like a
yeah,
spiritual or energetic origin, and they intersect through, the mitochondria and the chakras, right? Because the chakras go into the nervous system.
yeah. So I want to get into your experience that you had in India because to me, I think there's a lot that we can unpack there. First, I just want to hear your story, and then I want us to bring in and if I say woo, I don't want you to take that as a negative connotation. That's not
No, it's
how I
not.
mean it, right?
That's how I would describe myself too. Exactly. I think it's an accepted term nowadays.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to bring it together because I think that
Yeah.
at the end of the day, we have so many people suffering and hurting and looking for answers that we need to try to understand what we're talking about from a couple different ways. So tell us your experience going over to India.
Okay. Well, that is kind of a rich story. So I just dive right into the whole thing because I used to be married to an Indian man. And part of the reason why I went there was I had to clear something that my former in laws had thrown on me, energy wise. That 10 years of doing different things and seeing different healers wasn't removing the curse. Some people don't believe in curses after what I've been through. I certainly do. So that was part of the reason why I went through. And that's a whole novel right there. So that was part of the reason why I wanted to go. And another reason is I have a very close friend who's been going to India to this clinic for a couple decades. You know, she's been on a long cancer journey herself and she's turning the corner. She's actually, almost cancer free. I'm praying for her right now. Um, but I'd wanted to go and experience the healing for many years, and I finally made it happen. And so I experienced Panchakarma, which is based upon it's an Ayurvedic treatment. It's thousands of years old, and it involves specific massage with oleation, so the application of medicinal oils, so herbal infused oils. And the Ayurvedic doctor that treated me had previously practiced in Chicago and was able to test urine samples with laser spectrophotometry so he could see what was in the sediment, and he correlated it to the different types of patients he was seeing. So in Ayurvedic medicine, there's three doshas, vata, pitta, kapha, with different characteristics. So and they correlate with the different elements. So he could see like, oh, this personality type, this constitution had more sulfates in the urine. This one had more nitrates in the urine. This one had more phosphates. And so he really, he's more of an alchemist. So the treatment that I was receiving from him was beyond, traditional panchakarma. So I just surrendered, and I'm very sensitive, and I let the healing work on me. So it was a primarily vegetarian diet. I'm not a vegetarian. And so that part was hard. And after 3 weeks, I did introduce, I introduced some fish, and I felt better. But the benefit of being on the vegetarian diet was that you could detoxify more effectively. And so the oils, they're absorbed through the skin, and then you do a steam afterwards. So it's it's an extensive treatment, and they're massaging you, and they're having you lie in different positions. And then they also have created a pack of herbs that's wrapped in cloth. And then they're really hammering your body with these herbs and like massaging. And a lot of manifestations through my skin, rashes came through. I had plastic come out of my skin. I had this black square come out on my forearm. It was gone in a couple days. It was on the large intestine meridian after the day, like leading up to the first enema, because they do a series of herbal infused enemas that are very powerful. So you're like releasing for hours, after that. So it was very, very powerful healing experience. I got really clear, and we were just talking. It's like, to my benefit, but then also I'm feeling the environmental toxins here that much more. So having to do a lot more saunas now to sweat it out, basically. So
So, give us a little bit about the environment and the day to day there, right? So, like one of my biggest things on cancer's my primary world is like,
Mhm,
well, I went down to Mexico to receive such and such treatment. Okay, great. Fantastic. But what was the
mhm.
environment? What were you doing day to day? So, like when you say eating a vegetarian diet, I'm going to assume, at least hope, that that is going to be local and seasonal to where you were in India, right? They probably didn't have a Cisco truck backing up and delivering
No,
your
no, no, no.
vegetarian
Yeah.
diet, right? You're going to be in the sun more. There's going to be, so I'm also curious as like, what was the population to the location you were? Were you in the mountains? Were you in the middle of, a massive city? So go through a little bit of that environment, because I think that matters so much.
And I totally agree with you. And I would say right off the bat that this environment, it could have been like a more luxurious nature-based environment, but this is more, basic, and it's in the city, right? So it's been around there for decades. And so for me, because of the experience that the physician had and the emphasis was on this like traditional healing, to me it didn't really matter that it was in a city because I felt like I was in a bubble. But yeah, so it was more of a city environment. There were, traffic noises, but once you got in behind the gates, you did feel like you were in an oasis. He had a saltwater pool there so that you could um, utilize between treatments. But honestly, everything just slowed down so much. That's the thing I noticed the most. I'm very fortunate to travel a lot. And that's what I noticed the most in leaving the US is that we're at this like hyper speed, right? And so the days, even though we weren't doing that much, they did seem to go pretty quickly. When you have 2 2-hour treatments a day, there's not a ton of free time in between. So reading, a lot of times I was resting because as you go through the cleansing process, you're exhausted. Your stuff's coming up. I was in a lot of physical pain the very first week. And so he was saying that my root chakra was what's getting cleared. And then that energy that I told you about that I had to release in India, that was affecting my root chakra. So I could barely bend over and I was having to get up in the middle of the night and kind of walk around because it was like this deep, bone pain. They eventually found this like pain relieving cream that helped. So, yeah, so it was more of an emphasis on the experience itself rather than being in this really beautiful, pristine nature environment. There is a resort not too far away that we would go. We went to lunch a couple times, and when we were there, it was like, oh, it'd be amazing if everything was just at this place. And so maybe, someday down the road it would be. But yeah.
Too cool. So with India, I've looked at India a lot as
Mhm.
what seems like some sort of a paradox for essentially skinny diabetics, right? Like they are having an explosion of diabetics, which I would correlate to the data centers, the call centers, all that. The break in circadian cycle, right? Because they're working in the night while
Yeah.
the if they're a call center working for an American company, right, to be on the same time. So lots of things that they're breaking within the natural cycle. And so then, it is a very plant-based culture, right? And that is a mismatch for the lifestyle they're living. So what are your thoughts around the were you able to see much of what was going on in the Indian culture, or were you more isolated? And do you think that I'm just completely off base with that assessment?
No, I agree with you because I got my blood work done while I was there, and my fasting blood sugar was the highest it had ever been. And I knew it was because of the vegetarian, not only vegetarian diet, but like a higher starch diet. And so once I saw that, I, started going to the grocery store and eating more eggs, got some fish, etc. But no, I think you're absolutely right. And I think that the point of the circadian rhythm is probably right as well. I think that the traditional diet has the potential to incorporate adequate protein, but I don't know that people are necessarily well versed in that. So we did have some meals where it's like, where's the protein, people? So it is, yeah, I can see, how diabetes be rampant. Hmm.
Well, I mean, it's really bad. Um,
Hmm.
w- all right. So the detox conversation, I think it's really, really important, but I want to just briefly kind of give you my framework. It's light, water, magnetism, temperature, and time, right? These are the signals we have to optimize, and those receivers that we also have to optimize, right? We have an input, and then we have something that takes in that information. And I think it's going to translate into what you're talking about with frequencies and things. Is melatonin, melanin, membranes, and mitochondria. And it's like these are all the things that receive information. So when we're talking about detox, like melatonin is extremely important for detox, right? In natural production, mitochondria make 95% of the melatonin. Iron regulation, extremely important. Melanin is a heavy metal chelator, right? Also extremely important for iron regulation. So like these are things that are dictated on light. right? Like we have to have circadian rhythms, infrared light, UV, especially, POMC, pro-opioid melanocortin, and how we even develop melanin. So when we have that as a foundation, in my opinion, as detox, everything else comes much easier, right? And then we start looking at the modalities. So how do we optimize melatonin and how do we build melanin? That is my focus, right? So what are your thoughts on that? Because that's a big that's actually massive conversations. It's not just
It is.
sleep hormone. And how can we better relay the importance of detox in an environmental and lifestyle, say, more than simply a modality of a sauna or a hot bath? I'm not saying those aren't important at all. That's not what I'm saying. Exercise, lymphatic drainage, blah blah blah. Right? Like, what are your thoughts around that?
So, sleep, given that I'm a former insomniac of 8 years, right? If that's not right, that's kinda where I start in life, and then light exposure is a big part of that, getting some sunlight during the day. But for me, my challenges with sleep were kind of solved with an energetic, treatment, in that I'm an empath, and I didn't know that at the end of my busy workday, I had a practice down on K Street, 2 blocks from the White House, and then all my client stuff was stuck to me, right? But I didn't know, like, this was when I was first getting into energy healing, and so with my clients, what I have people do is focus on grounding, right? Whether that is spending time in nature with your feet on the ground or connecting to the earth, because the nervous system needs to be regulated, but it also needs to increase the bandwidth of the nervous system. Our bodies are not designed to receive as much stimulus as we receive, right? We haven't had a biological upgrade in how many, like, thousands of years with the same biology. But you think about the information that's coming at us 24/7, we're not meant to be flooded with as much information. So in my, the way I look at the human system as part of an energy body. So this might not be scientifically accurate, but this is just a way to describe it, that we're primarily energy. And even the physical part of us is energy. It's just more dense, right? And so we're like 90% energy, right? And so we've got this physical densification of matter. So we think about our energy field that's 3, 5, 12 feet, however long it is out from you, that denses down into a physical body, right? So that's kind of like the lens that I use in my practice. And in terms of getting somebody to sleep better, it's like we need to clear, like when you have a clearer energy field, your nervous system's going to be healthier, happier, has a greater bandwidth, can regulate, can ground, and you can hold your body in sleep. A lot of times when people can't sleep is because their nervous system is weak. In Chinese medicine, it's like that yin aspect, that slow quality. You need to have a lot of yin to be able to hold your nervous system and sleep. Light's part of it during the day, but then also, like, creating that substance, that nourishing substance, the bone, the body fluids, like thinking about your bone broth, like how can you really help to remineralize, strengthen somebody? And grounding is a part of that. I'm telling you, for me, I had low iron, low ferritin for forever. And then I started getting grounded, healing my root chakra. My iron's normal now. I didn't take iron because it always made me constipated. And I see that with a lot of my clients too. It's like low iron, people need to regrow their root chakra. So there are, physical applications of these energetic concepts. Insomnia is, a big sign that I think that people need to build resilience, and, working on the energy body that kind of frees up your physical body. We have the potential to become more spiritual, more light, more like a light being. And when we grow that potential, our bodies get stronger, as a result. We need to be doing everything nowadays, just given what we're up against. It's extreme, right? So I don't know if I was kind of like around it, but I think I touched on
No,
what you
you
were
did.
talking
Uh,
about. Okay.
you did, and the crossover there is blatantly obvious. As we go through this, so I couldn't agree more. One thing that I think is extremely important is I firmly believe now that we cannot get better in the same environment we got sick in, right? And so that as a fundamental principle, right? And what you're talking about with electricity, like one of the best examples of that is like how efficient does your coffee pot work if it has a ground or not? The grounding matters a lot. This is electrodynamics, but also you talked about the nervous system, and to me, that'll go into like myelin and neurulation and things. It's absolutely, but it all dura and fascia is made up of collagen and is piezoelectric, right? Collagen and bone are piezoelectric. They carry electrons, right? So like the grounding is massive, and so it's
Yeah.
actually really frustrating when it gets in the negative connotation of woo woo, and it's like physics actually explains every bit of why you need to be grounded, right? And so my point of going through that tangent was it, when you are in the East Coast, right? You're in New England and you are getting hammered by non-native EMF and environment. You're overstimulated. That is a nightmare. And then to completely be disconnected from grounding, natural sunlights, all of the processes that work, like it's a catastrophe. And so like I'm not
Yeah.
shocked by chronic disease explosion and all the issues that keep coming up.
No, not at all. Not at all. Yeah. Um, Not only is it a catastrophe, but it's also fundamentally changing human beings. We're becoming a new kind of species, right? And so I can talk about that in a couple of different levels. One is a lot of times the younger generation, maybe even, people who are just 15, 20 years younger than me, their chakra system feels different. When I get them on the table and I do the craniosacral work, which I blend with other therapies, is they don't have their own root chakra, and sometimes they don't have their own second chakra. It's almost like because when you think about it, I grew up playing in the woods, right? I didn't go on the screen until I did my naturopathic medical degree without the internet. I think it was like my last semester. I think I was a little bit of a late adopter. So we developed more as like natural humans, like with a root chakra. Our bodies know how to connect to the earth. And then the generations that grew up with screens, think about the development is different. They're not grounding as adequately, and they're like connecting to something outside of themselves. And then they're developing in that way. So what I'm feeling on my table is like their energy system's different. They're already evolving in a different way, right? So they're not connected as unique individuals to the earth. They're connected to their screens for one thing, but then they're connecting to each other. And I think that's, we're going to be seeing, differences as time goes on, because they do seem to connect more, communally, right? Like they might ground over concepts and movements versus having like, this is my own personal belief or opinion. So this is just something that, me and, other energy healers are kind of noticing that their energy systems are different. And then we think about what's happening to the environment and all the chemicals and nanoparticles, et cetera. We want to have a strong nervous system. We want to have a strong connection to God, light, oneness, a higher power, because we want to be able to override all the false energy. They're trying to make I was on you might be interested in, it was a Transhumanism Solutions Summit with Dr. Edward Group and a researcher. I can send you their information. You might find it really interesting. But they're coming up with solutions. How do we get these nanoparticles out of us? How do we not get this like biosilk network? They're turning from carbon-based humans into silicon-based humans with what we're drinking, what we're eating, and what's being sprayed on us. So, I mean, we could go down that whole rabbit hole, kind of doomsday, but it really was the first thing that slammed me in the face when I came back from India, because I could smell the chemtrails. And so you just know, I can feel like the spiritual connection is a lot dimmer here. Like can be harder to connect, especially when it's been all, chemtrails crisscrossing the sky. Right. And
So
so
were there a
you
lot
fight.
in India?
Sorry, go ahead.
Were there a lot in India?
No, none.
See, that's unbelievable. So I just
None.
have, my mentor from afar is Jack Cruz, and he's in El Salvador. None, there's none.
Right.
Got another
None
doctor we
Mexico
work
either.
with
Yeah.
in Ecuador. None. And so, like, if it was really a contrail, why do we have them and they don't in other places?
Exactly, right?
And how is it a conspiracy if they have patents?
Yeah, yeah.
It just doesn't really. It's that one's really infuriating that people are too dumbed down to even question why is a lingering cloud for hours staying up there.
Yeah, and you said the dumb down, and I had this really interesting insight. When I travel, it's like when I'm here, I'm in the front lines. Like I'm fighting spiritual battle all the time. Like stuff comes into my office. You can imagine what my practice was like. I was like 2 miles from the Pentagon. I was in DC. I didn't get the shot and lost a lot of friendships, and my email list went down by like almost 40%. But I could just see it really, really clearly. But there was a whole lot of dark energy that was coming in. And, I ran back to church. Like I was raised Catholic. And then I kind of was like, I need to do my own work. I studied Buddhism. I really connected with nature. And I knew like Jesus is very powerful spiritual support for me. But I was like, I don't need to go to church because I've got to do my own work. But I'm telling you, nothing was saving me from what was coming in. It was very scary. And so I went to church, and to this day, I go because it protects me. Like I needed the protection. I went full circle. Like I came back through a, kind of a desperate need. Um, but there are very, very dark forces. People don't like it when I talk like this, but I know like 2 or 3 other women who are also on the front line. I don't know many people who are like frontline spiritual warriors like we are. And, a lot of my clients or friends would say, you don't need to fight it. And I'm like, no, we're not fighting it. We're holding the light. And when you hold the light and the truth, and we want to maintain our sovereignty as human beings, those forces want to take us down. And so it feels like crap. Like you just got this heavy bag of tar on you, And so I'm constantly clearing and constantly, that's what it's like just living in the US. And then when I leave, so when I go to India, I'm like, oh, I have all these insights and downloads. And it's like my brain kind of works again because I'm not in like the trenches. But kind of circling back what I was going to say in terms of you mentioning people being like, quote unquote, dumbed down, is I think numbed down. You know how they use the analogy, you put the frog in the pot of water and they keep turning up the heat until it boils. Well, I think it's the opposite. I think you're putting the frog in cold water and it's getting more and more and more frozen. And so my sense is that we're just numbed. And that's a way to survive. The collapse response, the freeze response, you just slow down. And this is how our ancestors survived, right? When they had to deal, when they were surviving wars, famine, persecution, and you've got no way out, you kind of just, you numb and you slow down. And I feel like that. I feel that in my cells coming back to the US. So it's really interesting. It's a hard time, but yeah, it's also an
Really,
interesting study.
it
We
really
need
is.
more dance parties, right?
Yeah, 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 it really is. So I want to tie back into what you were saying on the chakras and kind of the younger the
Mhm,
iPhone generation.
mhm.
From a physics perspective, I mean that also makes it's a dopamine depleting practice, right? By staring at a
Mhm.
blue light, you're depleting your dopamine, you're destroying your melatonin cycles. Um, I I mean, we have kids that they can't sleep without taking melatonin, right? Or they have insomnia, or they have ADHD, or they have all these issues that are massively uh, detrimental, right, to overall. And it's like I, I still go back to there is so much that we can do on that lifestyle thing to just disconnect, and I think that's part of why, again, it goes back to it's woo, get with nature. No, it's disconnect from technology and connect with how life operates, right? Like it in the most simplified sense, that's what it is, and then we can figure out all the different explanations or whatever, but that is what's helping people because the people that refuse to leave the big cities are not getting better that I have seen over and over
I
and
know.
over and over.
Right, right. Yeah.
So you keep talking about leaving, right? Like or other countries and stuff. And it's like, there's problems everywhere. In some places worse than others. We got plenty. But I've got a good friend, Billy Bond. He's got the PIMP podcast. He's big permaculture guy. But he and his wife go down to uh, El Salvador for 14 days. And he said, dude, it's the best I have felt ever, right? So high magnetism. It's close to volcanoes. They ran on the beach. They were in the
Yeah.
sun. They were, he's got a great tan. Like just he fully embraced this local aspect of living there, disconnected, from the phones and the laptops and stuff. And so, uh, now their whole everything has changed in their world. And Billy's big thing, he's in North Carolina. He's like, dude, we're getting hammered. Like we're getting sprayed on like crazy.
Yeah.
And I-
Yeah.
so like he's very much having a similar conversation that we are right now. Um, but I think again, it just kind of goes back to the framework of light, water, temperature, and time. Light, water, magnetism, temperature, and time is like when we reconnect with those signals, everything
Right.
seems to work a lot better.
Oh, you're absolutely right. And then I have clients with children and they'll bring them in for like a craniosacral or an energy session, and kids are very responsive. So I'm always blown away. I love working with kids because they like learn it right away and then they're able to I do a lot of work through visualizations with them. And so I think ultimately getting them outside is huge. Getting them in the woods, just getting them by the beach, wherever they can just run around and be free. And my clients will say, "Oh my God, they have like I got my son back because he wasn't on the screen and he was playing outside with his friends." And so what I do is part of what I do is I should say is I teach them these visualizations, these nature visualizations to kind of get their nervous system, connected. And obviously you want to be in nature whenever you can be, but how can we support their nervous system in going into that grounding process when they're about to go to school and they're feeling like their stomach hurts or they've got anxiety, and kids respond right away. So I do these different practices and visualizations where like their legs are trees and then the soil comes all the way up to their waist. And then I have them, smell like an earthy essential oil and imagine what does it feel like to have your hands in the dirt. And so it's like an energy way to kind of recreate that. And when they practice it, it works for them. And the kids have fun with it because they seem to get it right away. Obviously, that's for like a busy lifestyle where they've got to be going to school. And like a lot of kids are doing their work on tablets now, the on screens. And
Disgusting.
so that's how it's like, let's actually create this pathway and that you can practice and then get outside whenever you can.
Absolutely.
So
I mean, that's the
it's,
number one reason that I homeschool, is the
yeah, that's the
environment. I
best way
don't
to
wanna
do it.
yeah, I just
A lot
so
of parents don't, they're overwhelmed, right? A lot
yeah,
of parents.
yeah,
Yeah.
sure. But, like, the whole framework is Galatians 6:7 for me, and that's, "Do not be deceived, God's not mocked. Whatever man sows, this he shall also reap." And so, like, our actions have consequences, period, right? Like,
Absolutely.
like, we have to take accountability, right? And so, like, when my little boy was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer at age 5, I had to, as a parent, own that, right? Like, now what do we do? How do we embrace it? And all the decisions that we make are going to have consequences, both positive and negative. So, to me, I think that it is obviously up to everybody to decide, but you need to just realize that these little decisions like digital babysitting, letting your kids stay up to playing video games all night, going to school or not going to school, right? All those things have massive ramifications for their health and who they are in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And then a lot of times, the parents are on the screens because it's like like business can revolve around how many people are on Instagram, like selling products and,
Right. Right.
promoting. So it's such a very complex, layered, dynamic situation, right? And it takes a lot of due diligence and a lot of intention to unplug, to get people into nature. And I think that it's, more and more people are wanting simplicity and, this whole boom of AI. People are, I think, seeing through it too, and you can read when somebody's newsletter is made by AI or their post is made by AI. So it's almost, yeah, I like it when it's more organic and there's typos or people are just kind of off the cuff and, unfiltered, right? So I think people are going to be wanting more of that in-person connection and, yeah, as a way to go.
From an energy perspective and your experience, would you agree with the statement that the biggest addiction that we have now is blue light, is technology?
Yeah, I mean, I have, and especially in the winter. So the winter for me is like I feel more isolated, obviously, and I find like, oh gosh, I'm getting affected by the technology, right? Like, oh, who posted this or what response to that? And um, I just don't feel well, right? I'm back in the garden again finally, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I feel so good." And my body tells me I don't want to be on I have a virtual assistant. Thank God she's checking my email for me because I don't like I don't like, what we're doing is fun. We're on the screen right now having a good conversation. This is one thing, but like living on the screen and running my practice that way, I'm just grateful that I have somebody who can check my email for me because I don't like being on the computer that much anymore. My body like really tells me like I'd rather be outside and I'm building a rock wall by hand now. I'd rather be out stacking the rocks.
I love it.
So,
I love
yeah.
it. There's so many things that we can do though, with technology. Like, so for example, I use Iris software. Like my whole screen's actually red. I can barely see anything. I use a chroma light. I can alter the spectrum. I have a reptile UVB bulb, right? Like, so blue blocking glasses for in the evening. All my lights have different. It's all within timing too, right? So red or bright, and daylight computer is what we use. It's what my kids use. Like, they're not, troglodytes. They absolutely utilize some technology, but it's in a much different way. And so like the daylight computer doesn't have the blue light. It doesn't have a lot of these other issues. You can use it right in the bright sun and still be able to see everything. And so like, there's so many different tools that we can utilize. And it's part of going into these conversations. It just matters more than I ever could have dreamed. And what changed my world was when Dr. Cruz told me, "I worry about your son if he stays on devices." And I could not understand what he meant, right? And then as I understand the physics and what we've talked about of what blue light's actually doing to the body, it makes perfect sense. And that's why I hammer it and sound like a raving lunatic, because it is so blatantly obvious, but we're going to spend, hundreds of thousands of dollars on treatments and supplements that don't get us anywhere. As you started, right, the whole conversation, I had to go outside of that model.
Absolutely. Yeah, and as regards to your son, if he's cancer free right now, right? So I would just hold on to that and like, you know, connect with that timeline. And like Dr. Cruz is using his expertise and he's got a knowledge base that he sees everything through that lens. I kind of have to, talk to my clients a lot who are dealing with like long-term illness and like really get the mindset right because the medical model is pathology based. So they're always going to think like, oh, you've got this, so that's your timeline. And it's like, not necessarily. You want to hold that that's over and done. And then from an energy perspective, you had mentioned like what got passed on from you and your wife potentially, right? So you can reclaim that. You can hold the power that he is my son and anything that he's carrying on my behalf, I take it back. Right. And I have parents do this exercise with their kids sometimes where they find like the least liked toy in their room and the parents say, give back what belongs to mommy, give back what belongs to daddy. This was never yours to carry. There was a mistake. We're taking this responsibility off of your shoulders. You are just the son. You are little, I am big. Right. So, whatever energetics were behind that kind of led to that progression, that pathway, as the bigger one, as the adult, you can say that is ancestral and you're my son. And this is my responsibility. And that's from a system of healing called family constellation therapy, right? So we're part of a family soul. We're all connected. And so whatever our ancestors went through that wasn't witnessed, healed, dissolved, integrated, transformed, transmuted, it gets passed on through us, through epigenetics. And it repeats because it wants to be healed. And so I've seen in my practice when people have died of cancer, they're actually taking that ancestral baggage to the grave with them. Right? It's a very different way of looking at cancer and looking at illness, but it's like their body showed up and was like, I'm doing this work. So I work with this concept of bloodline healer or generational healer. So I'm a bloodline healer, right? We sign up to do a lot of work. We're transmuting, the patterns, the karma, the sins of the father, the unhealed emotional wounds through our bodies, right? And so our life's work is more than just this lifetime. It is also on behalf of those who've come before us. So there's a lot that can be done, right? When you sign up to do that work, it's a lot of work. And maybe your son is a bloodline healer, right? Maybe he's a generational healer. So just another way to look at it, if it adds anything,
Yeah, no,
any insight.
fascinating.
Mhm.
Lander was diagnosed in 2019, right? So like
Mhm.
we're a long ways into
Yeah.
this journey. Been doing this a long time, right? But really interesting that the first thing that after he was diagnosed, I went into a health food store just looking for something, right? Like I don't know, I don't know anything. I was just like, and this lady walks up to me and she says, "Hey, can I tell you something?" I'm like, "What?" You know? She said, "I feel a lot of hatred in your heart," and I'm like, I don't know who this lady is, and she just told me that. And she's like, "You have a lot of unresolved hatred." And I was like, "Okay," you know? And so
Wow.
then she said, "Can I pray with you?" And then she gave me a couple Bible verses, and it went back to forgiveness, right? Forgive us as we forgive those uh, for sin against us. And anyways, I went home and thought about that and didn't take it as crazy and woo woo and just tried to marinate on that. And I forgave everything. I let it go instantly. And, I wrote about this in the book. Let it go. It was the most freeing, beautiful thing to just forgive, to be
Mhm.
forgiven. Right.
Mhm.
Like, and I think that was huge. So, like, to go on to what you're saying, like, I don't disagree with that at
Mhm.
all. I think there also can bring in things like embryology and germline and things that I did to
Absolutely.
my body and his mom had to her eggs and the environment we raised him in, blah blah blah, right?
All the above.
All of the
All the
above.
above.
And then you talk about instantly when you go bloodline. There's two things, right? One is DNA is electromagnetic, right, and it absorbs light and it emits light. This is what Roland Van Wyck calls delayed bioluminescence. Like we know this. This is in the literature, but also Doug Wallace, he's at CHOP, Children's Hospital Philadelphia. He is the one that identified that mitochondria are passed down maternally, like the maternal
Mhm.
lineage. Okay. So one more step from that, right? We have DNA that does a lot of things people don't realize. Wallace says mitochondria is a maternal lineage. And then we have Luc Montagnier that did the experiment that shows that DNA can transmit. Essentially, it is telepathic. And this is a Nobel winning, scientist, Luc Montagnier, that through water and DNA reconstructed the meaning, right? So the bloodline thing isn't woo woo and crazy, is what I'm telling you. Is like there is information being passed in ways that we can't even fathom, and I
Right.
think that it's really fascinating.
Right. And it's also a place to start because I'll work with people where they're just kind of at a loss. They've done a lot of different therapies, and in spite of doing all the right things, they're not getting better. And so I kind of look at what I call like the invisible terrain, right? In terms of their energy system, what was going on, what's a little bit of their ancestral story, right? Their childhood story. Even you think about just gestation, that's where that transmission's happening, as the fetus is developing in utero, in the womb, there's all sorts of transmission from the ancestral line that's happening. That's what I find in my work energetically. And so the deeper I go with people, we can actually energetically take them back to that place, or their body will guide me back into that field. And then I do kind of like a light transmission. Like one of the things I'm able to do over the course of the spiritual work I've done is I'm able to bring a lot of light in, energetic light, and then use that to loosen, soften, release, dissolve. Because ultimately, it's energetic blockages that gunk up cellular machinery, right? And so whatever hasn't been witnessed, healed, transmuted, or processed in someone's lifetime, in the ancestral lifetime, or even if we go into the past lives, that's coded for in the energy body, but then it's also correlated to the physical body. And so I can feel that in my hands when I'm working on somebody. And that can invariably be where the toxins or the infections get held or the discomfort is. And so a big thing that I do is help the physical body, the energy body feel safe. Because a lot of times we hold on to this stuff because we're afraid if we like confront it, we're going to die, because it feels like it's so loaded. I know when I was in naturopathic medical school, I was really curious about the woo woo stuff and shamanic healing and sweat lodges, but I had this feeling that Pandora's box was going to open and I was never going to graduate because I would just lose my mind. That was like the belief that I had. And so I didn't dive into this stuff until, a few years down the road. But a lot of times that's kind of, we carry that from our lineage where it's like, let's just move ahead. We're not like animals in the wild. Animals in the wild can run and shake their tail, shake their body, get rid of the stress. They like process it. We tend to hold on to it, tuck it away, hide it, and then move forward. And then you do that over the course of lifetime. Our ancestors do it over lifetimes. And it's just adding all this like interference, all this static, inside our cells. And so with energy healing, it's creating this safe space and witnessing, because when something is seen and witnessed, a lot of times the body knows how to heal itself. So the vis medicatrix naturae and naturopathic medicine is the body's power, innate healing power, and its power to heal itself. You've got to remove the obstacles so that innate healing power can express itself. And so for me in my practice, it all comes down to creating a safe environment where it's just natural to like put those burdens down. Oh, I didn't realize like I was carrying this. I don't need this. Right. On our own, we don't have the wisdom. We need the mirroring. We need somebody else alongside of us a lot of times to do there's so much we can do ourselves, but when it comes to these deep subconscious patterns, we're meant to work in connection with another human being to heal. And even with homeopathy, I gave myself my constitutional remedy for years, and I didn't feel like it did anything until a colleague, I consulted with her. She's like, oh, you need to take Nature and Muriaticum. I was like, I've taken that. She's like, well, who gave it to you? And I was like, I gave it to myself. She's like, well, that's why it didn't work. You're giving it to yourself. And it did work. She gave, it was like, I needed to have that mirroring. So I think we were in this individualistic society where we want to like be able to biohack and do everything ourselves, but we're not designed to heal in isolation. Like we need another nervous system. And that's why I think group healing is really the wave of the future, because everybody brings to the room what they've been able to work through and transform. Right. So.
Fascinating. So much.
Mhm.
So, everything that we've talked about is also being done inside of some sort of aqueous medium too, right? In some sort of a water, whether, blood is part water, cerebral spinal fluid, all these things, cellular matrix, inner, exterior cellular matrices. And so, like when we hear stories of like a organ transplant and with it comes like a change in taste, right? Maybe certain cravings that didn't exist. And so like I tend to think like there's so much going on with water that we don't look at. And it's why I think it's kind of crazy that we isolate things and pretend like the water doesn't matter. Right. Like if we're doing a study and we take out, a part of a cell and then we remove the water and then we think we're going to understand how it works. But, whether it's Veda Austin or it's Emoto, it's like so many different water researchers on frequency side, but then you have, so many like Wiles, Paparda, Del Gusse, like there's Montagnier, right? That was still water research in there. There's so many things going on with water that I think matter. And I know that we have like the whole, sacred cow that we're 70% water or whatever, but mitochondria make water, right? Like, and so depending on heteroplasmy rate, when we lower heteroplasmy, it creates more water. So my point of going through that tangent too is like I think water is a receiver, emitter, store of information as well, whether that's through hydrogen bonding networks, other structure, on and on and on. But I think it's also holding information, and from your perspective, it essentially could be holding a trauma, right? It could be holding some sort of a negative energy as well. Then this may be why gong therapy, the Reiki, the different aspects that can, I mean, they're working for people. I go,
Yeah, yeah.
we can make fun of it, laugh at it, whatever, but at the end of the day, it's working. So
Yeah. I
I
have a
just
gong in the garage.
I love it. I just hypothesize the water matters a lot, and that is an
Oh, it's on.
aspect that we need to pay attention to.
Well, I love the way you think of things, right? You have like the physics background and that framework. And so I think we're speaking about the same terms, but just using different languages and a little bit. But yeah, no, absolutely. When I feel what I feel, it probably is. And then, so in energy healing, polarity therapy, we're made of all the elements, right? And water is one of the elements. And so there are certain handholds that I'll use and certain body parts that correlate to the water element. And so, yeah, water is where our grief, where our emotions are stored, where that water element, if someone hasn't expressed a lot of grief in women, and I mean women and men, it can get really held in the pelvis in that second chakra. And I can feel that when I'm working on people, right? And so having a goes it can also go back to grounding. So having like a connection to the earth and balancing your earth element, I think of the earth as like the terracotta vessel holding the water element. If you're going to translate that to somebody's system, it's like, how do we get that earth really healthy so you feel stable? So you're
Mhm.
not overwhelmed by your emotions. So your water's not overflowing. And conversely, your water's not this frozen huge ice cube either. So you need to be able to express creatively. You need to be able to express your emotions. You need to be able to flow. Because when that water element is, deficient, stuck, it depletes your life force energy, right? Anything that we're blocking from ourselves or avoiding is depleting our life force energy, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, and not to kind of beat a dead horse, with physics, but, like, this is Elion Peregine's dissipative structures, right? It's flow. If it's too fast, it doesn't work. If it's blocked, it doesn't work, and so, like, it's entropy, it's flow, and all of that, it just makes so much sense, and what doesn't make sense is the way that allopathic medicine works. And it sounds crazy probably to some that I see more legitimacy in what you're talking about than I do with modern medicine because of physics, not counter to it, which on its surface sounds like it's, an oxymoron, but it just makes sense.
Right. Well, you're preaching to the choir here for sure. I mean, shoot, I went to the ER. I had to have my toe essentially sewn back on in the summer. I had to lifting weights outside barefoot. I was really helpful. I was really happy that a surgeon could like sew my toe back
Absolutely.
together. That's where like modern we need, and not to poo poo all of it, but we need a little bit of everything. We need to have a holistic approach, and it's getting harder and harder, right?
It is getting harder. I spent a decade on an ambulance, right? Like I understand what modern medicine and trauma does, right? Like I it's amazing. But I also see the limitations and how much we're
Right.
failing on chronic disease. So, uh,
Well, we make money off of chronic disease.
is that the truth? Um, all right. Well, let's wrap this up in where we are going to go to find you, the work that you're doing. If somebody wants to work with you or just learn more, where do we go? And
Yeah.
how does that work?
So check out my website, drmarierodriguez.com. I have a spring special going on, 20% off of the initial series of 3 sessions. And I keep an active blog so you can read my blog, then sign up for my newsletter because you want to stay in touch if you want to learn more. I will be rolling out a weekly healing meditation that's for the community just so we can all clear because things aren't getting any easier. And I think it's important, like I said, to connect as groups to really inspire each other and to bring in a lot of light, right, and be able to kind of clear ground and connect. So that's something that I'm looking forward to bringing through later this spring. And I'm on Instagram. You can Dr. Marie Rodriguez. So through one of those ways.
Well, thank you so much for the time. I've enjoyed the conversation and getting to
It
know
was
you.
great.
We got a lot of work to do.
We have a lot of work to do.
But thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This has been wonderful.